when you first hear about they're making a movie about Neil Armstrong and the trip to the moon, you just automatically think of, well, the music's obviously going to be bombastic and anthemic. But you guys went a completely different direction, much to my delight. So that must have been a conversation you and Damien had from the very beginning.
Yeah, it was. And I sort of assumed the same thing you did until I read the script, because I knew nothing about Neil other than the very basic thing that everybody else knows, which is he was the first person to get to the moon, and so it seems like a success story. But and then I read the script and I learned everything, about the loss of their daughter and the loss of these friends and colleagues, and how stressed the marriage and the family was over the course of these years because of everything that they were going through for NASA and for these missions. So I started to get a sense of, this is a darker story. This is a more complex story that I knew anything about. And then, talking to Damien about it before I sat down at the piano for that first time, and getting a sense of he always throws words at me, things he wants to feel from the music. And the first words he used were pain, loss, grief, loneliness. He wanted to really get at that with the music. And we talked about the music would be used in all sorts of ways. So it would be used it would be used to support, some real sort of action-packed scenes like the launch, and some real beautiful scenes in space. But it always needed to have that sense of loss in it, because that's something that Neil and the whole family were dealing with. It was something that was kind of underpinning all of those years, all those experiences, and almost, motivating him and pushing him to search for answers throughout the entire movie. So, and in searching for answers in space, really. It's like he was going on this cosmic journey almost to find the answers he couldn't find on Earth. It was really talking to Damien, which is when I got a sense of what this score needed to be.
Yeah. And I mean, Damien is obviously such a musically minded filmmaker. So how far into the weeds do you guys get when you talk about the feel of the pieces that you compose? Does he have ideas about instrumentation, for example? Yeah,
he does have instrumentation ideas. He was the first person to suggest theremin to me. So he mentioned that early on. The first step is always just finding the melodies and the themes, and that always happens at the piano. So that happened early on. That happened when as soon as he started prepping the movie, I sat down at the piano and started looking for the themes. And then once we locked those in, once we decided on the right couple pieces of material, then the conversation changed to instrumentation. So that's when he suggested theremin. We talked about the idea of mixing an orchestra with electronics, vintage electronics, and creating a little bit of some new sounds, sort of designing a few new sounds that would go in the score. We talked about ways to process the orchestra, ways to manipulate the recordings of an orchestra to make those a little different, and kind of fitting of what this movie was texturally. So that's where the idea of processing the strings the way we did came from. And he's very involved in every one of those decisions. He's listening to every demo. He's weighing in on everything. He also, speaking of being musically minded, he makes music. He's really envisioning the music throughout all steps of his process, which is great for me, because it allows me to come into the process early, and it's also just kind of incredible to watch the way he knows what the music needs to be so early on. there are sequences in the movie, and this has kind of been the case for every movie we've done, but for this movie, large sequences where he wanted music created before, like during prep, because he wanted to be able to storyboard to the music. And of course those cues change later on. I have to tailor them a little bit to the picture later on, but we're getting them as close as we can during pre-production. And he has this incredible mind where he sees the entire movie before he shot it. So he's giving me timings and exact shots, saying, okay, this is where the camera is going to be, then this is where the camera is going to be, and I need this section of the music to grow for 40 seconds, and then I need the strings to come in, and then I need this to grow for 10 more seconds. So sequences like the landing, for example, giving me really precise timings and telling me where each element needs to come in. Now I need the drums to come in. Now I need the brass to come in, and he's describing the shots and describing the cuts. And I'm just trying to listen to him because I have not seen the movie. He has in his own head. And so I'm just listening to him and trying to get as close as I can. And then he storyboards to the music. He and Lena Sandgren, the cinematographer, create their pre-visualizations, their animatics around some of these early mock-ups. And then he takes the music to set, and he has it with him as a reference if he needs it. And he makes it a part of his process, which is really great for me because it gives time for the music to really evolve over a long period of time. We get to live with the music, we get to tinker with the music, and we just get to, kind of integrate it to the filmmaking and the storytelling from the beginning.
And what I especially love about your score is that it actually contains a series of melodic themes, and more and more in films, since the end of the 90s, I think, a lot of composers have been called upon to kind of create dissonant soundscapes. It's more of an effects score than it is an actual melodic score. Was that important to you to maintain different themes for different segments of the film?
Yeah. And that's a sort of shared sensibility Damien and I have. And there may be, movies we make at some point that just don't have a melodic score because it's not always appropriate in every movie. But the movies he's made so far, he really wanted a very lyrical score, and he really wanted to focus at the beginning on melody and find those melodies. It's one of the actually most grueling parts of the process is searching for those melodies because you're not there's nothing to sort of fit into at that point. Like it's almost, once I can look at picture and I can respond to the picture, then it's almost I kind of know what I'm doing. But early on, when he's just saying, okay, find the main theme of the movie, that's before the movie's been made. So I haven't, and even if the movie had been made, it may be the same case where it's just like I don't know what I'm looking for exactly. I mean, I know what it needs to feel like because we've talked about some of those words that he's looking for, that he wants the music to feel like, but to figure out how that translates into a melody is kind of mysterious, and it can be very frustrating. It's the most frustrating part of the process for me. It's the only part of the process where I really develop quite a bit of doubt over, am I ever going to find this? Do I have it? Do I have the right melody in me? What am I looking for exactly? So I just have to keep going and going and going and trying idea after idea after idea on the piano. And I send him one piano demo after another, and we just narrow in, and it's a lot of no's. It's no, maybe, no, maybe. And then eventually there's one where he just says, yes, that is it. That's exactly what I've been looking for. And in the case of this movie, there were two pieces of material. He wanted the main theme melody, which is kind of the melody of loss and Karen and Neil's pain and Neil's grief. And then there was this sort of we call it the riff. It's kind of this family-oriented ostinato that's full of triplets, and we treated that. We thought of that kind of as like a secondary theme, and he wanted both of those pieces of material figured out early on during prep. But then we talked about a little bit where to use them, and immediately we started talking about let's keep them separate throughout the movie and let's have them operate in different ways, and then let's put them together for the first time during the landing. And he wanted the landing mocked up, and so after we found those pieces of material, the first piece of music that we actually created as a demo was the landing, to be able to put those two themes together and find the instrumentation, find the approach, the balance between synths and orchestra. There's no theremin in the landing, actually. It's one of the only cues without theremin, but at least we can sort of start wrapping our heads around the orchestrational language and sort of electronic language of the movie to some extent, and to figure out how those themes could really operate, could really come together, and how they could work in counterpoint. I mean, they were designed to work in counterpoint, but it was the first time that we actually tried it out. So yeah.
You know, tell me a little bit about the theremin, because it's such a unique, distinctive sounding instrument, and it kind of reminded me of like the saw that Jack Nitzsche would use in his 70s scores. Mm-hmm. Maybe he used theremin as well, but it's got such a special sound to it. What about that sound spoke to those themes you're exploring in the movie?
Yeah, it's we didn't know exactly how the themes would work on it till we got one and started playing around with it and put the themes on it. But the idea came, Damien suggested it, and I think the idea came because it's something that kind of places us in the time a little bit. It's theremin. I think most of our associations are 50s and 60s sci-fi. So it's something that felt era specific, and it's something that Damien liked the idea of having certain sci-fi flavors in the score, because as he would put it, these astronauts are going off on sort of a real life science fiction mission of their own. They're going off into the unknown. They have no idea what they're going to find. And so we liked it having those flavors, but from the very beginning, one of the questions we asked is it possible to use the theremin in a really emotional way? We didn't want it to feel campy or like it was there as a sci-fi instrument. We didn't want it to create, the sound of aliens and weirdness. We wanted to use it as the way that you might use a violin or a human voice or something. How can we use it really expressively and emotionally? That was something we wondered, and then we got one, and I started playing the main melody on it, which we had already figured out on the piano. And we put it on the theremin, and it kind of exceeded our expectations in terms of how expressive an instrument it could be and how human it could be. And that was actually kind of the most exciting discovery to me, with how human it sounded. It really takes on the quality of almost like a voice. It can sound like singing, it can sound like crying, and we used it to sound kind of like both of those things in different contexts. And it responds to your tiniest movements. It picks up on every little thing that you're giving to it. So it's so it's so emotional, and it's so human feeling. It's this weird intersection between technology and humanity. I mean, it's so obviously electronic, but it also feels like a very natural extension of your body and your voice, and that was a really great sort of discovery.
Yeah, it's incredibly expressive and oddly melancholy at times.
Yeah.
It gives the movie a very haunting quality, I think.
Yeah. We spent a lot of time figuring out how to exactly produce it, and we put it through different filters to give it. Like, we started off just using kind of the unfiltered theremin sound, and it's very a normal theremin is very bright and very very electronic and almost sometimes abrasive sounding. But we found putting it through a low pass filter, and then I would put it on tape. I would put it through the Echoplex, which is a piece of 60s gear tape delay, and both of those things gave it this really warm and gentle feel that almost sounded ghost-like and haunting, like you say. And so it took a lot of time to kind of calibrate the sound of it, and kind of over all those months of post. And this is where working to the picture actually is so important, because you can plan all these things and make all these demos early on, but until you see it against the picture, you don't know what's working and what's not. And it was seeing it against the scenes until we found, and it was such a crucial thing to figure out, was exactly where the theremin was sitting in the mix and how the theremin was produced, because it needed a certain type of gentleness to it to work in the score.
Yeah, and it seems like the actual process of playing it is a very gentle one as well, because I don't know if a lot of people are aware, this isn't an instrument that you play with physical contact. It almost looks like you're conducting the instrument.
And you never touch it, and like I said, because it's so sensitive, you do have to be very sort of still and very conscious of your movements around it. So it's a really interesting instrument to play. Yeah.
We love film composition on the show. Since our beginnings 12 years ago, we've celebrated the art of film scoring. So we're huge fans of it. And what I always like to ask each composer I speak to, if you were teaching a class, or if you were just asked for your all-time favorite film cues throughout the history of the medium, what are the titles that automatically come to mind for you?
That's really hard. I love City Lights has some of my very favorite music in it, which Chaplin composed himself. And I think the last scene and last cue of the movie, when they reconnect and he realizes it's her, that's an incredible, very, very moving cue that I love. I think the E.T. is one of my favorite scores, and kind of the bicycle soaring cue is just so incredible, and kind of gives me and probably anybody goosebumps. I'm trying to think.
I know it's an impossible question, because I'm asking you to consider the last 100 years of cinema in one question. But those are great choices. Justin, my friend, I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate your beautiful work. I cherish it, so thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. I appreciate that.